The clip lasted 12 seconds. That was all. 12 seconds that tore through cable news cycles, ignited hashtags, and drove a wedge deep into the American psyche. It began with a smile, a smirk really, that sideways curl Trump always wore when he felt in control of the room. The host had barely finished the question. Representative Crockett called your recent remarks the language of authoritarianism. Any response to her criticism? Trump didn't blink. He leaned forward like a man choosing violence. Crockett? He chuckled. Maybe if her daddy had spent less time ranting about the system and more time understanding it, his daughter wouldn't be screaming on C-SPAN for a paycheck. Laughter followed, but not from everyone. Not in the room. Not in the homes of viewers who watched that clip on loop for the next 72 hours. Not from the veterans who'd served beside Samuel Crockett in Vietnam. Not from Jasmine. The camera cut to the host, visibly unsettled, but Trump was already smiling, eyes scanning the crew like he'd just delivered a mic drop moment. It wasn't just a political jab, it was personal, it was surgical, it was cruel. By nightfall, the clip was everywhere. CNN aired it 6 times in 1 hour. Fox spun it as just another liberal meltdown waiting to happen. Twitter, or what was left of it, split down the fault lines, half accusing Trump of low blows, half cheering him on like a stand-up comic roasting a heckler. But Jasmine said nothing. She didn't tweet, didn't call a press conference. She canceled her scheduled MSNBC interview and disappeared from the Hill for 48 hours. Reporters camped outside her D.C. apartment. Aides deflected. The silence only deepened the tension. And then she walked into the Capitol rotunda. No cameras followed her inside. No entourage flanked her. Just the crisp click of her heels on marble. In her hand, a seal, an envelope. She handed it to the house clerk without a word and turned to leave. By the time she stepped outside, the document had already been leaked. A formal motion, ethics complaint, defamation aligned, filed by Representative Jasmine Crockett against Donald J. Trump for targeted public harassment and malicious denigration of a deceased military veteran with intent to inflict political harm. The nation inhaled. In her statement to the press, she was calm, measured. But something in her eyes, that controlled fire, the kind that simmers just beneath righteous fury, made every journalist in that circle lean forward. My father didn't build towers, she began. He built homes. He didn't inherit power. He organized for it. And while Mr. Trump may find humor in mocking his name, I find truth in confronting his legacy. The mic picked up a shaky breath as she steadied herself. This isn't about a joke. This is about the line between disagreement and degradation. It's about what we allow powerful men to get away with, and what we no longer will. The cameras flashed like strobe lights. Her voice didn't crack, but her fingers trembled as she folded the speech and tucked it away. That night, Trump tweeted in all caps, "She's losing it. Total meltdown. Pathetic." But she wasn't melting down. She was setting the stage. The next morning, the House Ethics Committee received a secondary motion from Crockett's office, a subpoena request for Donald Trump to testify in a special oversight hearing. The charge? Not criminal. Not civil, moral. And for the first time in a long time, the question wasn't, will he show up? It was, what will she reveal if he does? America was about to find out what happens when you laugh at the wrong father's name. The country didn't just hear the insult, it absorbed it. It lingered in headlines, echoed in living rooms, stirred up talk. Radio flooded comment sections. Her daddy didn't understand the system. The words tasted like contempt, bitter and knowing. By the following morning, it wasn't just a soundbite, it was a movement. Hashtags exploded. #say his name, #Crockett legacy, #Trump mocked a vet. Veterans groups began issuing statements. Union leaders, particularly from the South and Midwest, publicly voiced support for Jasmine. Old photos of Samuel Crockett in a dusty Marine uniform, standing outside a Union Hall in Fort Worth, began circulating online. They called him the quiet warrior who raised a lion. But Trump didn't retreat. At a Michigan rally packed with red hats and roaring flags, he smirked again. This time it was deliberate, calculated, provocative. Her father? He repeated with mock confusion. Never heard of him. Maybe he liked attention like she does. Some people are born to build. Others just talk loud. The crowd roared. Applause thundered. But outside the stadium, a different kind of noise was building. One that wasn't orchestrated. One that couldn't be muted by chance. Jasmine was watching. She stood in her DC office, alone, rewatching the clip. Again, and again, and again. Not with anger, but with something colder. Resolve. The folder on her desk was already open. Inside were documents she had been quietly compiling for weeks. At first, it had been personal curiosity. Now, it was war. She called her legal advisor. "We're not just filing for optics," she said. "We're going for the jugular." He hesitated. "What exactly are we digging into?" She picked up a stapled deposition dated 1983, a lawsuit filed by a black family in Queens who alleged they were evicted unlawfully from a Trump-owned property. "Fred Trump's secrets," she said flatly, "and the son who carried them forward." What followed was a flurry of midnight emails, hushed phone calls, encrypted folders. A retired executive from Trump management agreed to speak, off record for now. A property manager in Brooklyn, long ago, resurfaced with receipts. A legal historian surfaced archived documents that hadn't seen daylight in 40 years. Jasmine sat across from her chief of staff the next morning. She didn't need to raise her voice. "He touched my father," she said, calm but steely. "Now I'm going to introduce the world to his." What started as a televised jab had become a loaded cannon, and Jasmine Crockett was loading it, one receipt at a time. The Speaker's office tried to stop it. Quietly, behind closed doors, whispers spread through Capitol Hill like wildfire. "She's gone too far. She's making it personal. It's political suicide." But Jasmine wasn't asking for permission. She was invoking precedent. Within 48 hours of her motion, the House Oversight Committee convened an emergency session. Staffers scrambled, legal teams assembled, and in a move that startled even seasoned lawmakers, the committee voted 10-8 to proceed with a public hearing, broadcast live, open floor, with former President Donald J. Trump subpoenaed for questioning. The announcement hit the news wire like a thunderclap. Trump's legal team pushed back immediately. "This is a politically motivated stunt," one lawyer said on Fox News. "They're trying to bait him into a circus." But the subpoena was legal, ironclad, and it came with an expiration date. He had 7 days to appear. No extensions. Jasmine stood at the podium the day the committee confirmed the hearing. "I didn't ask for this," she told the sea of flashing cameras. "But I won't run from it. If someone believes mocking my father is political strategy, then they'd better come prepared to defend their own family history, under oath." The room exploded with questions. She didn't take any. Inside her war room, a small, secured conference space 3 floors beneath the Capitol, Jasmine and her team mapped out their strategy, not just questions, narratives, receipts, witnesses. The former Trump property executive agreed to go public. A whistleblower from the Department of Housing and Urban Development came forward with a FOIA-cleared memo. The team unearthed a box of handwritten memos from the 1980s, with DJT scrawled in the margins. Jasmine stared at the documents like puzzle pieces falling into place. "This isn't just about defamation," she whispered. "It's about who we let rewrite history." Meanwhile, Republicans scrambled to stall. They called emergency meetings, floated procedural blocks, even tried to swap committee members before the hearing. But the public was already watching. Trump vs. Crockett began trending at number 1. Talk shows dissected every angle. CNN aired a full segment titled, "What Did Fred Trump Teach His Son?" A reckoning was coming. The hearing wasn't just political anymore, it was generational. And every American with a TV, a phone, or a memory was about to tune in. The day of the hearing arrived like a storm over the Capitol. Heavy, tense, electric with anticipation. Reporters lined up at dawn. Protesters and supporters flooded the marble steps, holding signs that read, "Say his name," and "Mockery is not leadership." C-SPAN cut to a live countdown. MSNBC played footage of Samuel Crockett marching in a 1971 union protest, his face grainy but proud. Fox News framed the hearing as Democratic desperation theater. Inside the chamber, the atmosphere was thick. Committee members sat rigid, brows furrowed, flipping through binders thick with documents. Staffers whispered behind raised folders. The chair gavelled the session into order. Then Jasmine stood. No script, no notes, just a crisp gray suit, a sharpened gaze, and decades of family memory burning behind her eyes. "Some men inherit money," she began, her voice slow and clear. "Others inherit silence. My father left me both, and a duty to end it." She walked to the center podium and cued the technician. A screen lit up. First, Trump's interview clip. The smirk, the laugh, the insult about her father. Then a cut to a 2002 radio interview of Samuel Crockett himself. His voice, deep and weathered, crackled through the speakers. "They didn't want us in the homes we built, not just because we were black, but because we knew our worth. We weren't supposed to organize. We weren't supposed to outlast them." The room held its breath. Jasmine didn't blink. "This is who you mocked," she said quietly. Gasps rippled through the chamber. But she wasn't done. She entered into the record a memo from 1979, a document addressed to Fred Trump's legal team, warning of the risks associated with falsifying housing records and manipulating tenant applications. "Your father received this memo," she said, eyes locked on Trump's empty chair, "and your name appears on page 3. The camera zoomed in. There it was, in bold ink. Forwarded to DJT. Action pending. The reaction wasn't instant. It settled in like smoke. Committee members shifted. Journalists whispered. Twitter erupted. Somewhere backstage, Trump was watching. The smirk, for once, didn't come. This was no longer about an insult. This was about the weight of inherited power, and who had the courage to hold it accountable. The room had barely recovered from the memo when Jasmine stepped forward again, holding something new, a slim, black cassette case. "This," she said, "was mailed anonymously to my office 2 weeks ago, postmarked Queens, no return address." She held up the tape like a relic pulled from history. "We had it authenticated, the voices verified. The content speaks for itself." The screen lit up. Audio crackled to life. Low, grainy, unmistakably real. A man's voice, smug and loud. "Sometimes you got a clean house. Can't have two. Many loud tenants making demands. Donald handled it." Another voice, softer, concerned. "You mean Donald called the cops?" No, he called his guys, security. Told them, make it clear who owns the damn building. They got the message." Gasps. One committee member dropped his pen. The chair froze. Aide after aide typed furiously as Jasmine stepped back, letting the room soak it in. The timestamp, July 1984. The location, Trump Tower construction site, Lower Manhattan. The voice, Fred Trump. And the implication was damning, not just heavy-handed property management, but targeted suppression of tenant protests. Jasmine stood quietly as the tape ended. There were no theatrics, just truth. She let the silence stretch. Then she looked directly at the panel. "You mocked my father for fighting corruption," she said, "but your family made it into an art." Whispers buzzed through the gallery. One reporter stood and left mid-session, phone pressed to his ear, likely racing to break the headline first. Even Trump's allies on the committee were stone-faced now. Backstage, his legal team demanded a recess, but the chair, emboldened by public reaction, refused. This was no longer Jasmine's hearing. It was America's, and the ghosts of New York's past had just been given microphones. He arrived late. Not dramatically, not with a red tie whipping in the wind or a gold-plated pen in his coat pocket, but with the irritation of a man who believed he didn't belong there. Trump entered the hearing room like it was a courtroom he owned, flanked by lawyers, flaring nostrils, and that practiced squint. Cameras went wild. Journalists leaned over each other for the perfect shot. The chair called for order 3 times before silence returned. Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't even look up right away. But when she did, her gaze sliced clean through him. Trump took the seat across from her with visible disdain, shifting in his chair, arms folded tight. His lawyer leaned in to whisper, but mine had already begun. "I have only a few questions," she said, "and I'll remind the witness, you are under oath." Trump scoffed. "It's a joke. This whole thing, a stunt." Jasmine didn't respond. She tapped a folder. "Mr. Trump, do you recall the eviction of Ms. Gloria Santiago from a Trump property in Queens, 1982? "I don't recall every tenant from 40 years ago," he snapped. "Do you recall initialing a housing compliance memo marked high priority, replace tenant, DJT approved?" "That sounds made up." She slid a photocopy across the table. His lawyer objected. "Unverified documents, irrelevant. They're archived from city housing records," Jasmine cut in. "Stamped, filed, FOIA cleared. Your objection is noted." Trump leaned forward, nostrils flaring. "This is beneath Congress." "No," Jasmine said, voice low and razor sharp. "Mocking my father was beneath you. This is accountability." The room was still. Trump shifted. He tried to steer the conversation, muttering about fake news, political witch hunts, wasted taxpayer dollars. But Jasmine stayed the course. "Do you deny that your family received formal HUD warnings about discriminatory tenant removal?" "I don't recall." "Do you deny you enforced policies your father put in place?" "I ran a business." She stepped closer. "So did my father. He built homes, you tore them down." That line hit harder than anything yet. Reporters scribbled, fingers flying. Twitter exploded. Trump's face reddened. His lawyer scribbled notes. The chair warned both sides to maintain order, but Jasmine had already done what she came to do, force Trump to speak under oath, on camera, in the shadow of his father's past. And for once, his bluster wasn't enough to drown the truth. It was a faded green ledger, frayed at the corners. Ink bled through the pages like bruises on old paper. Jasmine held it gently, almost sent reverently, as she stepped back to the podium. This document was retrieved from a former property manager's personal archives, stored in a cardboard box for over 30 years, she said. It chronicles every eviction processed at a Trump-owned housing unit in Queens between 1981 and 1984. She opened to a bookmarked page and zoomed in on the projector. Entry after entry appeared on the screen. Names, dates, apartment numbers, eviction reasons, and next to some, initials. One entry silenced the room. March 2nd, 1982. Gloria Santiago. Single mother, 2 children. Delay requested. DJT. Override. Proceed. There it was. Handwritten. Clear. Trump stared at the screen. He shifted uncomfortably, jaw tight. "That's not my handwriting," he said. "No one claimed it was," Jasmine replied calmly. "But it was signed off by you. The property manager confirmed it, in a recorded statement before this hearing." She pressed a button. A video clip played on the monitor, grainy, dated just 3 weeks earlier. An elderly man in a hospital bed, breathing through a nasal cannula. "I didn't want to kick her out," the voice rasped. "Told Mr. Trump's son it was cruel. He just said, 'Brand matters more than sympathy.'" Next day, she was gone. Murmurs broke out in the chamber. One congresswoman covered her mouth. The chair called for silence. Jasmine spoke again. "This wasn't about missed rent. She was working. This was about image. And about who your father and you believed didn't belong in your buildings." Trump didn't respond. His lawyer flipped frantically through a binder. Outside, the video went viral within minutes. But inside, something deeper shifted. Because what was once political theater had become living proof of policy, prejudice, and power wielded without consequence. And Jasmine had just handed America the receipt. The hearing chamber had gone quiet again, not out of boredom, but exhaustion. The weight of it all pressed on the room like humidity before a thunderstorm. Jasmine took a breath, stepped back toward the center, and changed her tone. No more questions, just truth. She held up 2 documents, In one hand, a copy of her father's military service record. In the other, a federal court ruling against Fred Trump for tax evasion, dated 1973. "This," she said, lifting the first, "is the record of Samuel Crockett, U.S. Marine Corps, served 2 tours in Vietnam, honorably discharged, worked as a union carpenter for 31 years, paid taxes on every dime he earned." She raised the second. "And this is the legacy Mr. Trump inherited: shell companies, tax shelters, falsified invoices, a $3 million penalty absorbed like a paper cut." She walked slowly along the edge of the dais, making eye contact with every member of the committee. One man fought for a country that denied him loans, housing, even health care, and never stopped building it anyway. She stopped in front of Trump, voice tightening. The other man avoided war, gamed the system, and taught his son to treat poor families like liabilities. Trump opened his mouth, but the chair held up a hand. He wasn't allowed to speak right now. Jasmine looked down, then back up, fire dimmed but steady. "My father carried sheetrock on his back until it broke him, and he still paid his dues. Your father built lobbies out of marble and filled them with rot." Silence. Not even the sound of a pen scratching, just the echo of a truth too sharp to dull. Outside, crowds were growing. Some held signs that read, "Dignity is not for sale." Others chanted Samuel Crockett's name, like a prayer. Inside, the contrast had never been clearer. One man built walls to keep others out, the other to give people shelter. And today, finally, the world could see the difference. Outside the Capitol, the air had turned electric. Camera lenses shifted like predators scanning a battlefield, reporters shouting over one another to capture the moment. Jasmine Crockett's name trended in 22 countries within an hour. But it wasn't just her that dominated headlines. It was the line, "Your father built lobbies out of marble and filled them with rot." Networks replayed the moment on loop. Pundits dissected her tone, her posture, even the way Trump blinked, twice, in stunned silence. Jasmine didn't smile. She didn't gloat. As she exited the chamber, surrounded by aides and silent approval, she simply said, "I said what needed saying." By noon, every major outlet, from CNN to Fox, was running some version of the story. Conservative panels accused her of character assassination. Progressives called it a historic reckoning. Independents, they just called it refreshing. In barbershops and bodegas, on TikTok and talk radio, Americans debated not politics, but decency. She didn't just go after Trump, one caller said on a late-night radio show. She defended working people. That's the difference. Meanwhile, Trump's legal team scrambled. What was supposed to be a routine hearing had morphed into a national referendum. Overnight, old tax documents resurfaced. 1990s lawsuits recirculated. Depositions Fred Trump once buried were being quoted in prime time. And yet, Jasmine said nothing more. She didn't tweet. She didn't post. She let the silence do its work, the kind of silence that roars louder than any speech. The committee's offices were flooded with letters, some thanking her, others calling for her censure. But the truth was, Washington hadn't felt this shaken in years. One woman, one sentence, one courtroom. It was enough to change the weather across the country. 3 days later, the chamber was packed again. The crowd wasn't just there for policy or procedure. They came for the ending, for resolution, for whatever would follow that now viral moment that made half the country cheer and the other half see. The Jasmine Crockett entered quietly, no grand entrance, no press trail, just the deliberate calm of someone who knew exactly what the day demanded. Trump sat with his legal team, jaw tight, gaze fixed forward. Gone was the smirk, gone was the condescension. He didn't speak as Jasmine took the floor. He couldn't. She placed a small folder on the table. No theatrics, no monologue, just a sentence. "I submit this exhibit under Rule 15B. Inside were transcripts, old, sealed depositions from a 1989 civil case involving discriminatory housing practices by Fred Trump's management company, the very legacy Trump had tried to defend. Included were handwritten notes, initialed DT, approving rent hikes that targeted black families in Queens. Silence fell across the chamber like fog rolling in. Jasmine didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. She simply turned to face the bench. This isn't about politics. It's about truth. And the truth, no matter how buried, always finds its way back. A pause. Heavy. Alive. Trump shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward. Is the committee prepared to enter this into the record? Jasmine nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Let history speak. Flashbulbs exploded as the gavel struck, and with that, the final blow landed. Not with noise, but with quiet finality. Outside, the wind had changed. This wasn't just a scandal anymore, it was a reckoning. And Jasmine Crockett had delivered it with the precision of a surgeon, and the weight of a daughter who refused to let her father's dignity be dragged through mud without consequence.